All right, so we're going holding by Pirke Avos, ethics for our fathers, as is known. Again, when we're going to Pirke Avos, holding by ethics for our fathers, we are in chapter 2, Mishna 16. And this is part 42. There'll be part 43, 44, I'm sure part 45 as well. All right, nonetheless, when we're going to holding by Pirke Avos, chapter 2, Mishna 16, and the Mishnah says in the name of Rabbi Yeshua. The Rabbi Yeshua says, an evil eye, evil inclination, hatred of other people, remove a person from this world. So up to this point, we've been speaking about the evil eye and jealousy and different aspects of jealousy, about having proper emunah, that God runs the world. It's not about what's fair, right, or what's not fair. Spoke, quite a bit about that and how it all works. So we're going to actually move on. We're going to hit the next part of the Mishnah. And the next part of the Mishnah says that we said an evil eye, evil inclination. Yeah, evil inclination, or what we call the yetzer. Now, evil inclination, just as a little bit of background, evil inclination was outside of man, beginning of creation. Once man ate from the tree of knowledge, then the evil inclination went inside of a person, and so basically made things a lot worse, because there we're tempted, every second of every day, right, to do the wrong thing. I want to speak a lot about the evil inclination, but in general, it's not why that wasn't the purpose of creation, even though Adam made a calculation and said, basically, if the evil inclination's inside of a person, then exponentially, if they do the right thing, they get reward. Also exponentially, if they do the wrong thing, right, they'll get punished. So God calls Adam a heretic for doing such a thing, even though in the end, God agreed. God said, yeah, what you said is 100% true, right? But that's what I created the world for. It's not what I wanted mankind to have to go through. So, okay. So you did this. Then God has to go to plan B, even though God understood that there would be a plan B or potentially a plan B, right? And that is brought death to the world, right? That's what eating from the tree of knowledge did. So the evil inclination itself, Tosfos Yontiv, one of the great commentaries on the Mishnah. So the Tosfos Yontiv here says that, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? The yetzer, the evil inclination. We're talking about the majority of desire. What does that mean? What does the majority of desire mean? So he says, what does the evil inclination want? What does the evil inclination want more than anything else? Evil inclination wants try and destroy us. That's its job, right? That is what Satan wants, right? He represents evil inclination. He is the angel of death as well. But what is his desire? So I spoke about this last week, that the desire of the Satan is to trap people, right? To make them make mistakes, right? To, essentially put them in situations where, they're going to sin. That's his job. All right, essentially, that is his job. So the evil inclination comes and wants to destroy a person. Obviously, trying to convince the person to do the wrong thing. And how does it convince us to do the wrong thing? Through desire. Now, desire can be used in a good way. Could certainly be used in a good way. But nonetheless, his ultimate goal is to make us do the wrong thing, right? And, go in the wrong direction. So the Gemara says that God gave us an evil inclination. right? We have an evil inclination. And he gives an antidote. As we always say, what's the antidote? Antidote is Torah. Right? He gave us the antidote. Now, does Torah alone help? So Gemara says, no. You need God's heavenly help over here. Right? In other words, you need help. You need help to overcome the evil inclination. Even though you have the antidote. Right? Even though you have the antidote, evil inclination is very powerful. And because it's very powerful, right, even with the antidote doesn't help. And a person needs God's help. Yeah, so interesting enough, if God knew that, and God understood that, so why'd he do it? So again, that wasn't necessarily the purpose of creation. But now that Adam had sinned, so the world now has changed. Right? The evil inclination becomes much stronger, right? From the inside. Right? Even though, again, Adam was right. If we go according, we fight against our evil inclination, right? We're able to sanctify the soul, sanctify the body, right? If not, the opposite, right? So again, even though that's true, and God understood that to be true, and even if God agreed, he said, that's not what I want in the world. Because that's much harder. If it's outside of you, person walks down the street, they understand, there's a hole in the road, there's a pit, whatever. If they fall into it, they know it can cause them damage. Okay. But the fact that if a person's struggling day in and day out, seemingly every second of every day, I could go up, I could go down. Right? I can do the right thing, I can do the wrong thing. I can think the right thing, I can think the wrong thing. Yeah, with all that, was that the purpose of creation? Is that ultimately what God wanted? What's the answer? No. It's not what God wanted. Yeah, but he gave man free choice. Right? He gave man free choice to either go in the right direction, right? Or God forbid, go the wrong direction. He gave us choice. So you make the wrong choice, you're going to say, it's not my fault. I was influenced by the evil inclination. Very good. What can God say? First of all, he's going to judge a person where they're holding right now. Right? We learned that out from Yishmael. Because the Torah there says in Genesis, Basher Husham, where he's holding right now. Because the angels say, kill him. God says, right, as Rashi brings down, God says, is he guilty? He's a child. Is he guilty? No. Can't kill him. What is he going to do? See your progeny in the end. Right? What's he going to do to the Jewish people? In the end of the day, it's going to cause a lot of problems. Sure. Right? That's what he says to the angels. You're right. But that's not the question. The question is, where is he right now? Where's he holding right now? Is he guilty? Not guilty. So I can't kill him. Right? You can't kill him. So therefore, we are judged, interesting enough, we were now from Yishmael, we're judged where we're holding right now, right? It's very good for us. We're judged where we're holding right now. That's not about, future, future potential. We're talking about what a person goes through now and what they did in the past year, right? That is what they're going to be judged on, not on what their future potential may be. Okay. So each day, each second, each year, we're tempted by different things. Maybe we do it to ourselves. Part of it we do to ourselves. Maybe a lot of it has to do with evil inclination. Maybe it's both. Right? Regardless, we are tempted in this world. So a person can easily say, it's not my fault. You put me in this world. You gave me certain character traits. Right? We're born with a certain DNA. Do we have any choice who our parents are? No. Right? We're born against our will. We die against the will. The Mishna Pirke Avos says. In parentheses, Copper would say you still have to live. Okay. You don't have a choice who your parents are. You don't have a choice who your siblings are. You have no choice socioeconomic situation. You have no choice in almost anything. Okay. So then the question is, how do I deal with what I have in front of me? Good. Right? So that's the question. But he can't say, well, you made me this way. That could be a person's claim. And the person can say, what do you want from me? You put me in this world, which we're obligated in, so Ramchal says. In Derech Hashem, you got to be in this world. The only way you can reach a portion of the world to come is to be in this world, right? Otherwise you won't be able to reach the minimal level, right? And we're in this world to toil. Very good, right? A lot of struggles. People have a lot of different struggles. Okay. But even with that, couldn't a person make the easy statement to God and say, listen, you want to punish me for this? You made me this way. So God says you're right. Right? Let's say he agrees. And I gave you certain DNA. Okay. Did I tell you to act on it? I didn't tell you to act on it. I for sure didn't tell you to act on it. Yeah. But you chose to act on it. So why did I make you this way? Why did I give you certain things that are harder for you to fight against, maybe than other people? But everyone in the same boat in general. Right? You have more of this, someone has less of that. Okay. So someone has more of something else, you have less of that. Okay, don't matter. Everyone's got their struggles they need to go through. Very good. Now, even if that's true, even if that's 100% true, a person can say, but you made me this way. Okay. But God said, I didn't tell you to do it. Just because you have an affinity towards something, just because you have a bias, let's say, to something, maybe stronger than others. Okay. And God could easily say, I didn't tell you to do it. I didn't tell you to act on it. Not only that, I gave you a remedy. I gave you an antidote. What's the antidote? Torah. Torah's the antidote. Now, if I'm steeped in Torah, which a person should be, on a daily basis, if I'm steeped in Torah, how can a person sin? Because the Gemara says, person's only going to sin when a stupid thought gets in their head. How can they go against their creator? How can they do things wrong? Right? Only when something stupid enters their head. And whatever a person's going to do, let's say it's forbidden, whatever it may be. Is it interesting? Probably interesting. Is it fun? Probably fun. Very good. Yeah. See, so, then a person's going to make a claim and say, well, look at what most Jews are doing anyway in the world. Or what most non-Jews are doing, so cut me some slack. Even if I, indulge in this or indulge in that. But what does God essentially want? He wants you to serve him. And serving him means you do what he says. That's what it means. Again, he's going to take into account where you're holding, what's going on, different things. Okay. Right? He'll take into account where you're holding now. Very good. What's the problem? What's the obvious problem? The obvious problem is the person can say, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't ask for this. Right? Let's say it's something, it's something beyond you. You didn't ask for it. The question is, where does onus over here fit in? Onus means it's something against my will. Yeah, it's not something that I could plan for. Something out of my control. Yeah? So these things you can say, for better or for worse, they're out of our control. I didn't ask for it. Okay. Again, let's make it very simple. You didn't do it. You didn't, that wasn't something you would have done. Okay. So you can say, as we said before, you made me this way. You gave me certain character traits. Right? You gave me certain character traits. Very good. So what do you want? It's the way I was made. I was made about kas. You made me, get angry too easily. You made me stingy. You made me whatever. God can say, you're right. I gave you certain character traits. Other things you probably did to yourself. Well, let's say we'll make it very easy. Yeah. First, I can say, you gave me these character traits. God can say, I agree. I gave them to you. So what was the purpose of giving them to you? The purpose was for you to overcome them. That was the purpose. For you to fight against negative things. Things are going to take you away from me. That was your goal. That's what you should have done. And not give in. What are you going to say? We're an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust. Right? Person lives in a town, in a city, in a state, in a country. right? On a planet, sorry, a continent on a planet, getting smaller, galaxy getting smaller. You're going to think, okay, what I do doesn't matter, right? It's very good for the month of Elul as well. What we do does matter, right? As the Rambam says, the law is repentance, right? There's a scale in every town, every city, every state, wherever a person is. There's a scale. Whatever I do right now can tip the scale one way or the other, either for good or for bad. Because, hey, look at everyone else around me, and what's God going to say? I don't give a rat's tail who's around you. That doesn't matter. I don't care. We're living in a cesspool generation and how weak it is. You got an obligation to serve me to the best of your ability. So who cares what's going on around you? And we've said this many times before, right? Especially about jealousy. We don't care what's going on around you. Nobody should care. Person went on vacation. Good, so let them go on vacation. Yeah, but they went on a fancy vacation. So what? Will that affect you? If I feel bad and I can't do it, right? Or I can't build and someone else had money, or I'm just not in a position, where I live, I can't act, whatever it is. What does it matter what's going on around you? God's not going to ask you that question. The person going to answer and say, but look at this person, look at that person. Like, what do you want from me? What's God going to go? He's going to go bank. He's going to go, I don't care. Right? What do I care what someone else does? I'll deal with them. I'll deal with them and how they act and what they do. That's not something you have to worry about. Very good. So if it's not something I have to worry about, why do we bring it up? Why would a person bring it up? Because the person will say, look what this person does. Look what the other person does. Look what the third person does. God says, yeah, so what's that have to do with you? Yeah. So again, I'll give an example how far that goes. I think I mentioned this before, but I'll mention the following story. So whenever it was in Johannesburg, we went to South Africa. He was there for about 13 years or so, for about half a year at a time, right? He was there. And when he was there, they were burying secular Jews next to religious Jews. Now, the head of the Chevra Kadisha, the burial society, the head of the Chevra Kadisha wasn't religious. He himself wasn't religious. So, once tried to stop a funeral, right, in order to bury someone, somewhere else, and whatever, they made mincemeat out of him. And, in the press, he had to make a special gathering, in a synagogue, why he did it. And, the press were saying he hates, this is really rabbi, hates secular Jews when they're alive, hates them worse when they're dead, right? So he told them the following. He told them like this. He said, when a person dies, yeah, you're buried next to somebody, whoever it is. Now, God's going to say, okay, what's one of the first things you're going to get asked? Either were you honest in business or did you learn Torah? Right? There's a difference of opinion. What question gets asked first? But let's say they ask him, did you learn Torah? What do you mean? How can I learn Torah? I live in South Africa. How many people learn Torah in South Africa? Right? You got to cut me some slack. I'm on their own this. Right? It's beyond me. It's beyond my capability. What does God say? Right? What could God say? He said, look at the person sitting next to you, lying next to you. Yeah. Yeah, the person will say so. That person was an Orthodox Jew. He could keep Shabbos. He can make blessings. He can serve me. So why didn't you? Now, on that's going to make a person look really bad. Because you're buried next to somebody that kept Shabbos. So obviously better, as my Rebbe said, to be buried next to someone who didn't keep Shabbos. Yeah? Because God's not going to ask you that question. Because if you buried someone who didn't keep Shabbos, okay, you're in good company. You're in good company. But if you're buried next to someone that kept Torah mitzvahs, and you didn't, then God's going to ask you. That's probably one of the questions He's going to ask you. Yeah? How come you didn't keep Torah mitzvahs? So you come up with excuses. Person can say because of this, because of that, because of the other thing. But what could God easily say? Oh, you lived in a place where nobody was keeping Torah mitzvahs, so what do you want from me? That's this guy next to you. That's bad. That's going to make a person really bad. So my Rebbe said, I'm saving you. You should be thanking me. He's like, why are you all yelling and screaming and jumping up and down, right? And coming out against me. Yeah, if you bury a secular person next to a religious person, they're in trouble. They're going to be in serious trouble because they don't have that excuse. They can't make such an excuse. Oh, I didn't know about Torah mitzvahs. Impossible. No one ever kept Torah mitzvahs. God says, nobody? It's people around you. They all kept Torah mitzvahs. Why didn't you? So my Rebbe says, I'm here to help you. Because in the next world, you're going to be in serious trouble. You're going to have no excuse. You have no excuse over here. Yeah. So again, our complaint, which won't hold any water, but our complaint could be, or somebody's complaint could be, but you created me this way. God says, you don't think I know? You don't think I know how I created you? You don't think I know which body I put you in? And what the circumstances surrounding what you have to do and fulfill in this world? You don't think I'm aware of that? I gave you the best chance to fix up whatever you need to fix in this world. I gave you a certain body to be in order. That's your situation is the best way for you to reach your true potential. Now, we may think that's crazy, right? Why would we think that? Look around us. People can say I was given the short end of the deal, short end of the stick. Yeah, look who my parents were. Look who my siblings were. Look at all these different things. I was set up to fail. Totally set up to fail. Yeah. And the things I was in control of. Totally not in control. But obviously God knows what he's doing. Yeah. He knows what he's doing. So he gives us the best chance, whether we think so or not, doesn't really matter. Right? God is giving you the best chance in that body right now in your situation in order to reach whatever potential you have to reach. Whatever you have to go through, he's giving you the best chance. Best chance of success and spiritual success. But of course, a person could look at it and say, really? You gave me parents, let's say, that were narcissists. You gave me siblings that were, had other issues. Right? And I had all kinds of other things I had to go through. Why is that the best chance? So, if we knew what went on in that world and what the source of our soul is and what we're here to fix and all these different things, good. We'd be on the cover of every magazine. Everybody would be trying to get information out of us, right? How everything works. We're not in control, right? Very few things in this world we are in control of. One thing we are in control of, or potentially in control of, is how we react to things. Right? Now, a lot of people would probably, when something happens, what do they do? They react. What we call a knee-jerk reaction. Knee-jerk reaction means whatever happens, you just react. Whatever your emotion tells you. Even if your intellect is trying to calm you down and, and this and that, what happens? The person explodes. Let's say. Person explodes. Why they explode? Because they lose it. Why they lose it? Because of the situation they're in. They give a chance person to think, to relax, to, whatever. Person should never react straight away. But a lot of times, that's what we do. Right? We react the way we do because we don't really think. We just react. And a lot of times, person wishes they could take back what they said or what they did. And sometimes in the heat of the moment, you just do things. You do things what your nature would tell you to do. But who says your nature's right? Again, we're not animals. That differentiates us from animals for sure. Makes us better than animals. Because we have the ability to make decisions. Animals don't make decisions. Right? As we always say, the programmed DNA. Animals do what their instinct tells them. They say, well, man, in that situation, don't they do the same thing? They shouldn't. It's not about instinct. It's about what the right thing to do is and whatever that situation is. Now, sometimes maybe we do the right thing, sometimes we don't do the right thing. But if a person acts only on instinct, so that doesn't differentiate them from animals, and seemingly they're no different, as we mentioned many times. Rev Ellie will be on a blessed memory. right? Said never happened to use it, but it's a good line. Someone says, I can do whatever I want. Yeah, he's talking about the greatness of man. He says, I can do what I want. All right, secular person says, so, says Rev Eliopian, very good. So what differentiates between you and an animal? Animals also say they can do what they want. Yeah? No, they'll say it, they'll do what they want. Go here, they'll go there, they'll eat, they won't, this, that, they'll do what they want. So what differentiates between you and an animal? Says Rev Eliopian. What differentiates them is that a person has the ability to go against his nature, to go against his desires. That's the difference. Animals can't do that, right? Now, again, using that in an argument, the person going to get offended. You're going to call them an animal, right? So again, I haven't necessarily tried it. I haven't necessarily tried it yet, but it's a very good line. It's a very good line because animals only do things based on instinct. Man is greater than that. Man is the pinnacle of creation. Man has the ability to make decisions. They can make good decisions, bad decisions, but they have the ability to think, to reason. Animals don't do that. What they do is based on instinct. Okay. Right? But a man has the ability, not that we always do it, but we have the ability to go against our desires. Yeah? We have that ability. Animals don't have that ability. So that we have the upper hand. Totally have the upper hand. Yeah, but again, aren't we, don't we think a certain way? Don't we act a certain way? Haven't we been doing this for years? That's why it's so hard by Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to change anything. Because the person knows. After that, they've been working on this, working on that, even small things, doesn't matter. They're working on themselves, and what happens? In the back of their mind, they know, are they really going to change? It's really going to matter. They'll be all inspired for a certain amount of time, they'll go back to being who they are. That's what they'll do. So the answer is, why should I bother? There's no point. Yeah, I'm just going to go back to being who I am. So a person won't even try. They'll give up before they start. Right? That's bad. But again, that's also part of the evil inclination. Because what does the evil inclination want? He doesn't want you to become better. He doesn't want you to strive, and go in the right path. And be close to God. Just the opposite. He wants to make you weaker. Right? He wants to make you overthink things. Right? He wants you to be in situations where you're not going to come out and make the right decision. Or potentially make the right decision. Or he'll put you in a situation, let's say, and this happens a lot. This certainly can happen a lot. There's a lot of peer pressure around us. Right? People pulling us in different directions. Family, friends, right? So-called friends or whatever. Yeah, and at the end of the day, what they want is bad for us. And no question it's bad. They want you to be more like them. That's what they want. Right? Without getting into politics, that's the same thing that's going on with the army. Yeah, they'll say they need more people. We have to share the burden, all that. Okay. But even before that, when that wasn't the case, when they didn't need people, Orthodox Jews in the army, right, here in Israel. Yeah, but what was the claim? Be like everybody else, got to share the burden. Okay, but deep down, what do they want? And it's very clear. Very, very clear. What do they want? They want you to be more like them. That's what they want. They're not interested in you keeping Torah mitzvahs. Yeah, sharing the burden is a very good line. It's a very, very good line. Again, there's a lot of emotion here, but it's a very good line. We want everyone to share the burden. Very good. That's what they want. Sounds very good. But what are they actually saying? What are they actually saying? They're saying, we want you to be like us. Not the other way around. That's what they're saying. And they're disguising it in this whole thing about share the burden. Now, someone could say, again, without getting into politics, someone could say, well, you have separate groups. You can have religious units and this and that. So it's all like that. Yeah, but at the end of the day, the whole, the way the whole thing is set up, it's set up for a person to fail. Yeah, and a person to fail miserably. And most people go in, even if they're going into religious units and this and that, these are not like the cream of the crop people sitting and learning, right? Now, usually usually, even in such a case, they don't normally come out stronger, in religious observance. I know a few that, that basically didn't stayed intact. Okay, right? But the vast majority do not come out more religious than they went in. At the very least, like, let them stay the same religiosity that they were, but they're in a no-win situation. They're in a situation where their goal, 100%, is to make them to make us like them. That's their goal. That's the underlying goal, right? Of course, we don't want any part of that, right? A person's very fragile as it is. Right? They'll say, listen, you can be in your own unit, you can do this, whatever. But that's their goal, right? So even without getting into that, what about people surround us? Family, friends, whatever. What do they want more than anything else? They want you to be exactly like you were before. Most people want you to be, exactly what you were before you started this journey. That's what they want. Nothing more, nothing less. Or, I don't know, maybe they want more. I don't know. Right? But essentially, they don't want. They don't want you to change. They don't want you to be different. They, genuinely, they want to have a relationship. Very good. Yeah, that is good. Problem is, where's that relationship going to go? Yeah, most likely it'll affect you in more of a negative way. It's not worth it. Again, when I tell people, as we said before, when I tell people totally cut off relationships, depends. Some relationships you can't cut off, so you have to put up boundaries. Okay, but in general, if it's bad, it's going to have a negative effect. I would say the same thing. People say, well, it's a little fanatical, but I'll say it anyway. And that is, a person, God forbid, got cancer. Yeah, if you got cancer, what do you do normally? In most cases, you burn it out. That's what you do. That's what you have to do, right? In most cases, right? In some cases, you don't need to. Okay, so even better. Yeah, but if you have it in a certain place or it's spreading or whatever, that's what you gotta do. You have to burn it out. If you don't burn it out, what happens? It'll overcome you and kill you, essentially. Yeah. So these negative relationships, what do they do? What do they do? Same thing. They're drawing you closer to their stupid things, right? And they want you to be more like them. That's what they want. Or for you to be the same. Yeah. They want you to stay the same. They don't want you to change. They don't want you not to go out with them, not to go out to eat, not to go to a pub, not to go to this. That's what they want. Yeah, they want exactly what they had before. Right? Like someone told me, many years ago, I had said something, it's like, oh, that's the person I remember. I'm like, I'm still the same person. Yeah. The way I look at things is very different. Okay. Personality hasn't changed, that much, much more careful what I say and whatever. But, essentially that hasn't changed. Right? A person, if they were extroverted before, they're not going to be introverted now. Right? That's who they are. Now they're going to channel it in a different way. Okay. They're going to channel it in a better way. Good. So who they are doesn't necessarily change. What they do and how they think, that changes. Right? And that's what scares people. Because they'll say, you're in a cult, you're being brainwashed, and the answer is, yes, thank God we're being brainwashed. Yeah, even though they don't know really what a cult is and whatever, but still, yeah, that's not a bad thing. It's for sure not a bad thing. But what's their ultimate goal? Their ultimate goal is not to understand where you're coming from. They're not interested. Especially if it's a different religion, right? But even if it's the same religion, right? Secular Jews. Are they interested in why you made this decision? Are they interested in the direction you're going? No. They don't care. Why don't they care? Because they don't want to be influenced. They don't want to change. Yeah, now, interesting enough, for some people, they make drastic changes for good, not for bad. And people around them, I think that's kind of an amazing thing because I've seen it, and that is people around them, what's the question they don't ask? The question they don't ask is, why did you decide to change? What got you to change? I mean, it's a bigger question. Someone grew up as a Christian, and converts, becomes an Orthodox Jew. Yeah, they change from a different religion. right? But it's just as valid a question as why someone secular, if they grew up secular as a Jew, why did they become religious? Yeah, it's a similar question, right? It's coming from a little different source, but it's a similar question. Somebody, secular Jew, very secular Jew, asked me this question many years ago. They asked me, why would someone non-Jewish want to convert? Yeah, so I said 95% of them. Well, actually, I'll tell you how the conversation went. So, even before I get to that answer. So I said, okay, let me ask a different question. Why would a secular Jew become Orthodox? They said, okay, valid question. So I told them they're, searching for truth. People searching for truth, whether secular Jews or non-Jews. The person looked at me straight in the face, straight in the eye, and said, "All right, come on, get real." Like in their world outlook, anyone's looking for meaning, besides sports, TV, and who knows what, and food. Like people looking for meaning, they couldn't imagine. They could not imagine. I told them, 95% of people I deal with came out of Christianity, and they saw the lie of Christianity, and Christianity is supposedly based on the Torah. So go back to quote unquote the Old Testament, and they learn about the Old Testament. Eventually, if they're searching for truth, they really want truth, God will help them, put them in the right direction. Yeah, it might take a while, but they'll be put in the right direction. I might as well dropped off from Mars, from a planet. They couldn't imagine such a thing. Again, I'm not saying most people that shallow. I mean, there are people, that shallow, but they could not understand for the life of them and their world outlook why someone would want to change. Why somebody would want to, not only just change religions, but even a second Jew become religious. Because most people will say, if they're not religious, they're going to say, "Oh, they must have been lacking something. They needed, they needed to find meaning in their life. I got plenty of meaning in my life. Yeah, like playing cards all day, golfing, like traveling, what? Now some people would say family, you know, my kids and my grandkids and whatever. I think you can ask them, okay, that's beautiful. How much your family do you really see? I would say they travel a lot, whatever. They see them, here and there. I mean, if family's that important, you'd probably be around them a lot more, I would think. Or if Noah Weinberg, bless the memory, asked the question, he was head of the Yeshiva of Asia Torah. So he wants to ask somebody, he goes, "What's your greatest pleasure?" They said, "My kids." So then he asked them, "What's the greatest source of your aggravation?" Thought about it, he said, "My kids." So he said, "Okay, let's go to the original question. What's your greatest pleasure?" "Yeah, what's your greatest pleasure?" So he said, "My kids." So he said, "Let me ask you, how many kids you have?" "You have so much pleasure, how many kids you have?" He goes, "One." So he goes, "What's the matter? Too much pleasure?" I'm not talking about where, a person had difficulty having kids or whatever. They have one kid. Yeah, so it's all about having pleasure. And this is your greatest pleasure, why don't you have more? Let's say we had difficulty, whatever. One's enough. People want to have, remembrance for the next generation, right? Let's say. So yeah, person normally have two kids. Person has three or four. In a secular world, that's already huge. Yeah. So, people certainly, I got seven. Like people think like you're out of your mind. Like you're absolutely out of your mind. I had somebody tell me once, yeah, again, fact is always greater than fiction. You can't make this stuff up. Person absolutely like animals, is a vet. A person says they have one child. All right, not whatever. A person married to a non-Jew has one child. Good, right? Not really their child. Child's not Jewish. Whatever. Fine. Person says I'd rather have animals than kids. And he said, that time I had six kids. I think he said you got to be out of your mind. Forget it. Didn't even say, "Wow, look at all the expenses. Look at this." He just said you're out of your mind. One's enough. Yeah, one's enough. Okay. There's some people out there that don't want kids at all. I had a woman tell me this. Woman in her 60s, was it bad? Was it bad for me not to want to have kids? She wasn't Jewish. Now there is, there is a mitzvah for non-Jews to have kids, and the reason is so they, replenish the earth. So you have, you have a next generation, right? They can have two kids 10 years apart, doesn't really matter, right? But essentially, they have a mitzvah. They also have a mitzvah, right? To have kids, because otherwise you won't have a next generation. But like you see in some places, it's like almost negative birth rate. Nobody wants to have kids, right? So this woman says, this woman tells me, I never want to have kids. It's that bad. I said, well, I mean, I said besides the command, even for a non-Jew to have kids, I said it's not normal. I mean, the woman's older, it's probably now in her 70s. But for a woman not to want to have a child, in general, at least a natural child, you go back 70 years, 60 years. I want to say that's certainly not the norm. It's not the norm, right? Every woman, more or less, at least wants to have one child. Today, it's totally warped and, messed up generation. But back in the day, all things being equal, at least one child. At least one child. To say that a woman doesn't want to have a child, I can understand a guy. That I could understand that, right? To a certain extent. But a woman says, yeah, that was my natural inclination not to have children. It's not natural. That, according to nature, is not natural. Totally not natural. Today, again, if you're telling me 70, 80 years ago, that's a big thing. If you're telling me today, I definitely can understand. Because we live in a messed up generation. Okay, that's not normal. That's totally not normal. Now, that being said, there are a lot of factors, a lot of things that a person sees, that a person encounters that go 100% against Torah. Now, years ago, the beginning of the 20th century, you had plenty of Jews going off left and right. Based on what? Based on different isms. Rebbe Chanan says, Shem Yikam Damo, that God should avenge his blood, or Chanan Wasserman brings down the epics of the Messiah. What was a major test in the early 20th century? The test was all these different isms. Communism, socialism, democracy. Took tens of thousands of Jews away from Torah mitzvahs. Yeah, so there was a tremendous, so every generation has its evil inclination, whatever it may be. But every generation has it. But what's it all based on? It's either based on things they're convinced of, or things that they believe in, that take them away from Torah. And they can be totally destructive things. So you have today, people are putting, guns, to people's heads and say, kiss the cross or die. Right? What are people doing? People are giving up the Judaism left and right. That's what they did. As they did, came to America, threw their tefillin overboard, and that was it. They want to give their kids some Jewish education, gave them a very watered down Jewish education, but the most important thing to them was what? Was money. Was making money. They wanted to have an easier life. Give their kids an easier life. Okay. Now, it's giving the kids, an easier life. Is that helping them? Is that going to keep them closer to Torah mitzvahs? No. Because, first of all, people teaching them don't believe in it. And teachers don't believe in it. They're not going to believe in it. If they're not going to believe it, why are they going to bother to keep it? Right? They're not going to bother to keep it. So there's no point. So the more watered down it gets, the worse, the worse it is. So what do I have? So you have a lot of different factors surrounding a person that are going to cause them, not only go astray, but to go really, really far away. So I heard a stat, which is a pretty scary thing. I shouldn't say it's so surprising, but, today, if, an Orthodox Jew, I don't say a modern Orthodox Jew, goes to university. They live at that university. Yeah. They dorm there, let's say. Yeah. So they've been educated for, they've gone through school for 12 years. They've learned, they got Musar, a lot of things. And they go to a secular university. Could be a prestigious university, doesn't matter. And what happens? How much time does it take them before they stop keeping Shabbos? So the statistic is 1 semester. 1 semester. Why 1 semester? Why is it so quick? Why is the destruction so quick? The destruction is so quick for one very simple reason. When are most of the things that kids do in college, when do they happen? On Shabbos. So a person's like going to stay in all of Shabbos, not go out, not hang out with people. People are coming and going, this and that, Jews, non-Jews, doesn't matter, right? They're doing all these different things. You're going to be left out. Person's going to be able to stand up to that temptation? Never. Impossible. Maybe you have a few here and there, maybe. Yeah, the vast majority, they're not going to come out the same. For sure not going to come out the same. And there are many parents, who like rip their hair out because the kids, they send them to these prestigious universities, even less prestigious universities, doesn't really matter, and they come out, either less religious or not religious at all. And they're like, how'd that happen? Right? How could that have happened? What's the answer? What do you mean, how could it have happened? Pretty obvious how it happened, right? What is that environment? I mean, I don't think the environment's got better since I was there. Yeah, 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago. Probably got worse. Probably got a lot worse. You're tempting them, and this is the whole point. You are tempting them and putting them in a situation. Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't stand up to such a temptation. Yeah, because hey, prestigious university. Yeah, I can make a lot of money. Whatever you're gonna do, this and that. Okay, so you gotta get the education. You gotta be there. Very good. So let's say it's true. You gotta be there. Yeah. How much do you, interact, this and that? A lot of these things should be foreign to you in many ways. Depends on obviously how you grew up. Yeah, but if, even with, a halfway decent Jewish education, you're being thrown into a lion's den. Nobody can survive such a thing. Right? So what I'm going to say, maybe you have a minority, like a very, very small minority, that will survive such a thing intact, and the religiosity intact. Not going to happen. Right? I'm not going to say it's like 1%. It's not even 1%. It's less, like 0. Should be 0. How in the world can someone stand up to such temptation? Seemingly impossible. Right? And the parents are like, what happened over here? And the answer is you sent them to a place, no matter how much you paid, no matter how quote unquote great the education is, and whatever, you sent them to a place to fail. Right? They're going to fail. Right? And again, the evil inclinations have to work that hard because their mentality is, I want my kid to be a doctor, lawyer, actuary, this, that. They have, they have to go to college, get them into, they get into a good college, let's say a good university. So what do you expect? Like, what in the world do you expect? So you say their mentality is cracked anyway before they got in. Okay. Right? I may agree. 2 feet in the secular world, 1/4 foot in the religious world. I get it. Right? That makes sense. But what in the world do you expect? You can't have the best of both worlds. And, the only question in such a situation is how much the person going to fail. And normally we say no one's ever put in a situation just to fail. Right? In other words, the only question is how far are you going to go? That's the only question. Right? So normally we don't say that. We don't say a person's in a situation they can't handle. But you put someone in this situation, it's not a question of not being able to handle it or not. They're finished. It's game over. Right? 100% is going to be game over straight away. Straight away, it's game over. You are putting them in a situation absolutely to fail. Now, if someone come out, they're not coming out as strong as they went in. That's for sure. That I can guarantee you. They're not coming out that way. If you want to tell me they're coming out the same, they don't come out any worse than they went in. Yeah, again, I'm going to say that position is 0. 0, unless they're living at home. If they're living at home, they got a better chance. They got a better chance. But again, the point is the pull of what's going on around them and the mentality of people there, they'll get destroyed. Right? The evil inclination is so strong over there. They have the antidote of Torah. Very good. They have the antidote of Torah. So they can spend some time learning Torah, strengthen themselves. Yeah, even if they don't learn so much, okay. But you gotta be like, like the Rock of Gibraltar. You have to have boundaries within boundaries and boundaries and different things. Right? How can a person survive? How is it going to be possible for a person to survive? Spiritual. Now, is the workplace any different? Also, you got issues. Spoken about this before. Also got plenty of issues. Yeah, keep a person intact. And you get all kinds of influences. People say things, way people dress, all kinds of things. And they want you to be like them. Got to be a team player. Got to do other things. Okay, certain things you might have to do, but you got to be very, very careful. Very, very careful. So what's the point? Point is, all these outer influences are negative. They're negative. It's very rare we're going to see any of these influences being positive. Very rare. Very, very rare. And even if some are, okay. But let's say, very good. Is that going to tip the scale? And in most cases, the answer is no. Even to give them some strength, give them some more identity. Right now after October 7th, so you got more, secular people want to learn more about Judaism, this, that, okay. I mean, it's sad it took a massacre for that, but okay. But again, even if their Judaism is strong, so good, they'll be strong against these anti-Semites or whatever. But at the end of the day, unless they come to Torah and mitzvahs, they're not going to get the word they need to. They're not going to be strengthened that much. But they're just like everybody else. What differentiates them? That's the point. What differentiates them? What differentiates Jews from non-Jews? The Torah says we're a chosen nation. Yeah, we chose God. God chose us, for better or for worse. What makes us different? Not better. What makes us different than non-Jews? What we do. The mitzvahs that we keep. Yeah, so isn't it true what all anti-Semites say? Right? They are going to say, beyond the shadow of a doubt, look, you're different. Look at what you don't do. You eat differently, you have different holidays, all these different things. Right? And secular Jews will say the same thing. The secular anti-Semites. Be like them. Be like everybody else. Right? It's why, secular Jews, being rounded up by the Germans couldn't understand. Like, take Orthodox Jews. What do you want us? We're like you. We eat your food, go to your gymnasiums, we go to you follow your, sporting events, we marry your women. Like, what's the problem? We're exactly like you. And what the Germans say, no, you're not. You are different. Right? You are totally different. Regardless of what you keep or not, doesn't matter. That's the reminder. If we don't attach ourselves to what we need to do in spiritual terms, then the non-Jews are going to let us know. Right? And for a secular Jew, that's a very hard thing. That's a very hard thing. They're like, I'm not religious. Like, I don't keep any, I don't keep very much. Like, why do you hate me so much? Why should you hate me so much? And the answer is it's in the air. And it's a reminder. It's a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call. And no matter how far a person's gone, God will remind you. He'll send you reminders. He can send you reminders in a nasty way. Yeah. It's one thing I couldn't necessarily understand either. When I was growing up, and people made comments. I was an Orthodox Jew. Okay, I went to synagogue I went to synagogue on Shabbos. Some things I didn't do. Well, okay, but didn't make me an Orthodox Jew by any stretch. Not even close. Right? But there's that animosity. Right? Even if you're not religious. If you are religious, more animosity. Because of what you represent. Right? But there people will say things. People will say things. And they can be the quote-unquote most intelligent people. And you see what intelligence brings to them. We've said many times, intelligence does not breed morality. Definitely does. You see the great, top universities, and no one can make a distinction when genocide would be bad. No one can make such a distinction. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. So the more, so someone pointed out, the more intelligent a person is, most likely to be an anti-Semite, because they'll cloud everything. Because they have more intelligence, so they can see things, quote unquote, in different ways, and and say what they want. Which, I mean, they sound pretty stupid, also. And just like all these people, without getting into politics, saying what we're doing is genocide. Well, if it would be genocide, we're doing a terrible job. Yeah, we put out leaflets, tell people to run, people to flee, this, that, they're going to attack. It's the most, moral army there is in the world. And that's what generals in the States and Britain and other places said. So, genocide, I mean, even if it would be, even if their numbers are true, nobody seems to care, and this is a mind-boggling thing to me. Nobody cares if they use them as human shields. Nobody cares. Right? And they're sending tons and tons of food to an enemy. The enemy's getting it. Yeah. No matter who the people are. Hamas is everybody and everybody's Hamas. It doesn't change anything. No one's really innocent over there. But who feeds them? A population that they're enemies? Nobody. Yeah, I think the Americans were done to the Germans during the war. Nobody serves an enemy, and gives them tons of millions of food. That's insanity. Who would do such a thing? Nobody cares. Doing enough. No matter what Hamas does, it's insane. Doesn't make any rational sense. Any rational sense whatsoever. Yeah. And anyway, this is a war. They started it. We didn't start it. This is a war. But someone to say, like, you can't say there's anything wrong with them, that's, what they do is a problem. It's a serious problem. But anyway, that's not the point. When a person gets, and you have secular Jews saying that as well. Yeah, not all secular Jews, obviously, but you have that belief in the plight of these poor Palestinians or whatever. Quote unquote. And we're our own worst enemy. We are our own worst enemy when it comes to that. How can you have thousands of Jews protesting against what you're doing to do for survival? What you're trying to do for survival? Or the other side. I mean, there were secular Jews, in communities near houses. They couldn't understand. They helped these people. Gave them food, gave them shelter, other things. They helped these people. What they do? They butchered them. So somebody like that go out of their minds. Makes sense? Their whole mentality now has changed. They had to find out the hard way. These are things most people would probably figure out and would understand, but depending where you are on the spectrum, where you're staying on the spectrum. But even in such a case, they couldn't understand, like, what would drive that? How could that happen? Look what we did for you. Look how much we helped you. And what they say, doesn't matter. You're better off dead, and that's our goal. So we faked it a lot. Very good. We faked it. You bought into it, so you deserve to die anyway. Yeah, you can't explain that rationally. Yeah, if you understand the Arab mentality, it makes sense. Yeah, the Western world doesn't understand that. They're learning. They will learn the hard way, but there's a reality, right? And one of the things the person has to be aware of as well, just on this topic is the fact that people are being spoon-fed poison through the media, social media, the other media, whatever, poison. They keep saying the same things over and over again. If they say, if you perpetuate a lie for so long, people are going to believe it's the truth. Even like the most heinous lies that are out there, right? I would say in the top 5 of the biggest frauds, biggest lies in the world, besides Christianity and evolution, put those probably 1 and 2 or 1 and 1A. He put this idea of Palestinian people up there also, right? It's in the top 5. One of the biggest lies in the world. But they keep perpetuating the same thing, where it makes absolutely no sense. But again, that's what the Arabs are good at, lying. That's what they do, right? That's their nature. One part of their nature. They lie. right? But when the lie, when they say the lie enough, everybody picks it up and everybody puts it in print, so they believe it. So you get the whole world behind you to believe it. It's an insane thing. That's the way it works, right? So you can say Israel has a PR problem, yeah, that's for sure problem. But at the end of the day, if a person's being portrayed as a victim, no matter what you do, you can't get out of that problem, right? It's very, very hard to get out of that problem, right? In any case, this is all part of the same theme, right? The theme is what I see around me, right? And how it affects me. Now, this changes a person's, in general, changes their mentality. It changes the way they think. And the main reason is very simple, because they are going to believe hook, line, and sinker whatever the media says. Now, there's a right-wing media also out there. If you're on the left, you ain't going to listen to it because you think it's all, you're also going to think it's like propaganda and this and that. But to get to the truth of what's out there, I would say much better just shut off all the things, because it doesn't matter. Everyone's giving the spin this way, that way, right? To get to the truth, is not so easy. But at the end of the day, you have you have so many influences working against us. So how is it possible someone can have the right mentality? Someone can go in the right direction. Someone can stay, the religious Jew, or as a Noahide without veering off. Right? It seems like an impossible position. Now, the good thing is, this is all negative, right? I've been pretty negative here, but the good thing is that we have an antidote, right? We have an antidote. And what's the antidote? The antidote is Torah. Very good. Yeah. Why isn't the antidote? Now, I need God to help me, right? That's also part of it. I need God to help me and to overcome this. But why is it, as my Rebbe asked this question, why not prayer? If we pray from the depths of our hearts, or the depths of the heart, as we would say, so if a person prays from the depths of the heart, why does that overcome other things? Why doesn't that help me overcome this negativity and what I'm surrounded by? Let God protect me, right? Through prayer. Very good. So what's the answer? Right? We're saying it's not enough, right? I need something else. Besides, I need action. And what's the action? Being strong in Torah. Because anytime a person doesn't, we'll get to this, I don't know when, but there's a Mishna in Pirke Avos in the 4th chapter, right, that says when a person does the right thing, they create a strong, positive, angel, right? And that helps them, it strengthens them. So when a person gets strengthened by what they do, very good. When you get weakened, what does it do? Makes you want to go in the wrong direction. In other words, when I do a mitzvah, I can strengthen myself, do other mitzvahs. Very good. As we say, mitzvah goreres mitzvah. If I do the wrong thing, if a person sins, yeah, avera goreres avera. A transgression leads to other transgressions. So now, a person in the big world, so to speak, or as some people may say, quote unquote, the real world, right? They're in the real world. Now, what is the real world here? Our purpose to be in this world, yeah, you got to make a living, you got to learn things, okay. You got to be around other people, okay. That I can understand. Yeah, but you have to know how to navigate it. You have to know how to live. You have to know how to stay away from problems, right? Bad influences. And sometimes you don't have a choice, right? This is the kicker. Sometimes you have no choice. Now, you heard something, you saw something, whatever, and that affects you for life. Potentially affects you for life. In other words, even if a person works very hard, not to think about it, etc. Very good, it gets buried. It gets buried in the soul. Okay. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Now, does that mean it's totally buried? Doesn't mean it never comes up. No. Doesn't mean it never comes up. Definitely doesn't mean that. It can come up, right? When can it come up? Whenever a person gets weaker, right? That's when it can come up. Yeah, when a person's not strong. Now, it could take weeks, could take months, could take years. Doesn't matter, right? It doesn't mean it's totally buried. But if I don't have the antidote, and this is the point, if I don't have the antidote of Torah, again, I need God to help me. Very good. But if I don't have the antidote of Torah, there's no possible way for anybody to succeed against this powerful force. There's no way. So Torah is, we say, near mitzvah Torah or. Near mitzvah, a light, a candle is compared to a mitzvah. Torah is compared to light. Yeah, so if I learn even a little bit of Torah, what does a little bit of Torah do? Pushes away a lot of darkness. That's what it does. Pushes away a lot of darkness. Now imagine if I learn a lot of Torah. Person learns a lot of Torah. They're very strict on a lot of things, let's say. What does that do? To push away a ton of darkness. Now, does that eradicate darkness? Does it get rid of it 100%? No. Still there. But the more I'm steeped in Torah, obviously I need God's help over here, because as much as I'm steeped in Torah, there's also an evil inclination. How's that work? Person can be learning. They have, set time to learn, whatever that time is. And then there's a mitzvah. You say, oh, no one else can do it. I have to close my Gemara. I have to stop learning, and I have to go out and do this mitzvah. Now, if no one else can do it, very good. Yeah, then you have no choice. Then you have to do it. Yeah. But if it's a mitzvah you're done by someone else, you're in trouble. Because then you just gave into, you gave into evil inclination. And you'll say, this is a good evil inclination. Once we do the mitzvah, very good. Yeah, but you didn't have to do it. You 100% didn't have to do it. You chose to do it. Okay. So you went out of your comfort zone. Or not your comfort zone, but you want to help someone. Okay. Who says at this point, when I'm learning Torah, or someone's learning Torah, you have an obligation to do it. So again, it depends what it is. If it's something, cannot be done by anybody else, in general, has to be done now. Question is, does it really have to be done now? That's another question. But let's say someone came across a dead body, God forbid. No burial society. Right? Most cities have their own burial society. Let's say no burial society. Right? It's a Jew, the person has to be buried, otherwise it's a disgrace for the body. Yeah? So no one else around. Okay, you shut the Gemara. This is what you have to do. Right? This is what you have to do. You have to bury the person, disgrace. Okay. Right? If it's something that has to be done now, and it cannot be done by anybody else. But it has to be not done by anybody else. So a lot of different, scenarios can happen. A person has, emergency in the family. Okay. Like, you have no choice. Some things you have no choice. You have no choice. And that's the mitzvah. Stop learning and do what you're supposed to do. Okay. But there are times where a person gets in a discussion, doesn't have anything to do, with what you're learning. And that discussion leads to another discussion, leads to this, get involved in politics, 20 minutes, half an hour go by. Yeah. Now, it's interesting. Might be interesting, has nothing to do with what you're doing. Not only that, it's a waste of time when it could be learning. Right? So, a person, if they're learning, they have to be like dead to the world. Like nothing, if they have a certain amount of time, like unless like your house is on fire or something like that, you're not answering the phone, you're not doing anything. The Mishnah later, which we'll get to, the Mishnah says that a person's learning, let's say, if a person's learning, they look outside and say, wow, what a beautiful sunset. They say, what a beautiful mountain. Whatever it may be. What does the Mishnah over there say? The Mishnah over there says, you are liable for death penalty. You deserve to die. What do you mean? Right? Obvious question. Well, why? I can understand. Maybe it's not a good thing while you're learning, per se. Right? You're focusing on something else at the moment. Okay. What's the problem? I mean, why is it, let's say better, why is it so severe? Why is it so severe? So I can understand you want to tell me That's something I should be doing now. I could praise God's creation another time. But to say it deserves death penalty? I mean, that's kind of severe. So, what's the simple answer? You want to go look at creation and praise God's creation? Very good. Not a problem. Go do it, not when you're learning. When you're learning, you got to stay focused on what you're doing. A person can get distracted. A person can get distracted. Very good. Yeah. You don't want to get distracted. So even in such a case, you're praising God's creation and you reach a higher spiritual level. Yeah. You reach a higher spiritual level, recognizing God's creation. You did it at the wrong time. You did the wrong time, right? So someone asked, I say, death penalty? Yeah, death penalty. They're liable to die. They should die in such a case. They should die because they said, what a beautiful mountain in the middle of learning. That's why they should die. The question is, why? Why is it that severe? Because if a person's learning, you're not looking at God's creation while you're learning. Now, it could be, in the middle of learning, let's say it's thunder and lightning. Okay, then you stand up, you make a blessing, right? For the thunder and for the lightning. Okay, that's doing a mitzvah. Very good. That, wherever a person is, they have to stop and make the blessing. If they don't make the blessing, they lost out. Even if a person's learning, for one split second, you make the blessing, you go back to learning. That's a different issue, right? That's where you have an obligation to make the blessing. In this case, who says, if I look at God's creation, right? I'm looking out the window as I'm learning. Very good. Or maybe not so good, I don't know. You look out the window and see a beautiful sunset. So you say, wow, what a beautiful sunset. Says the Mishna Pirke Avos, liable for death penalty. Why? You're praising God's creation. Right? It's a beautiful sunset. No one disagrees. Make it easy. No one disagrees. It's a beautiful thing. Okay. Who in the world says I should make that statement while I'm learning? What does it do with what I'm learning? So the Mishna says you're out of context. You're learning. You stick to what you're learning to. You're not worried about how beautiful the sunset is. It has its place. Right? The praise God's creation has a place. It doesn't have a place when you're learning unless, let's say a verse comes up. I don't know. You're learning something, a verse comes out about creation. Right? And you mention something about creation, and it's okay, that's one thing. But to stop learning and looking outside and, oh, what a beautiful sunset, liable for death penalty. Right? Right? As if to say that's more important than what I'm learning. It has importance. No one's saying not. The Torah learning comes first. So if that comes first, what am I mentioning it for? Right? I mean, whatever. Different ways to look at it. That's one way. That's definitely one way to look at it. But it's very easy. And again, there's another point, is that it's very easy, as we always say, to get distracted. Very, very easy. People say things, you hear things. A person feels they're missing something in the news, they need to know what's going on. Whatever it is. And the outside world in general has unbelievable influence. And mostly negative. I'm not saying there aren't positive things. But a person will watch, back in the day, you watch a newscast. Yeah. You watch a newscast for half an hour. Forget the sports, forget the weather, whatever the main news things. How many things does a person hear in the news? I'm not saying in half an hour, I'm being generous here, right? Let's say it's half an hour, not an hour show, even a half an hour. How many positive things you're hearing from the news? Hearing about killings, you're hearing about murder, you're hearing about theft, I don't know, you're hearing about all kinds of negative things, wars. Yeah, you're hearing all kinds of negative things. Probably 99% of what you're hearing is negative. It's totally negative. Every once in a while, say once in a blue moon, you get a story that's a good feel story. right? Or a feel good. It's a feel good story about man's compassion with with man, with animals, whatever. Right? It's a feel good story. Okay. Does every broadcast that a person watches on a weekly basis, and I'm talking about every single one, does each broadcast for half an hour, for an hour, doesn't matter. How many feel good stories are there? Probably not too many. Probably not too many. I don't think things have changed. I don't think things have changed over the years. You have them. I'm not going to say not. They're very sporadic. Very, very sporadic. Right? It's all about doom and gloom. You watch the news. All about doom and gloom. Wars, famines, fires, crazy weather, man's inhumanity to man in general. That's what you hear. Majority of the time, it's all negative. All negative. Forget about Lashon Hara and other things. That's a different issue. Right? I'm not even talking about that. Yeah, all these things, makes a person cynical, makes them negative because of all the negative things. Right? And once in a blue moon, you hear something good. Yeah, it's very rare. It's very, very rare. It's not common. Right? Now, if you had like 2 in 1 week, that'd be huge. That would be absolutely huge. But you don't have that. You barely have that. And even if you do, someone will say, yeah, saw the news all week and there were like 3, 5 stories. Okay. That's the norm? Not the norm. Right? Again, 99% is all negative. So a person's getting all this negative things, all this negative news. That also has an effect on a person. For sure has an effect on a person. And if and then they're giving the commentary and they're spinning it this way and spinning it that way. Right? So a person, so hearing what other people think, which really doesn't matter. No matter what, quote unquote, they're experts in this and experts in that. Right? They're not looking at it from a Torah perspective. So it also has an effect. I get questions all the time. How are we supposed to look at this or look at that from the Torah? Good, it's a good question. Because the way they look at it, this thing happened here, this thing happened there, right? You don't make any rhyme or reason out of it. It's, man's inhumanity to man, but why does it happen? How should I think about this? So it's a good question. Where does it fit into Torah philosophy? Good. It's a good question. But looking at the world the way they portray it, there's no God. Everything just happens, right? Just like we read at the end of this week's parsha about Amalek, right? At the end of the parsha's key say, what does it talk about? Amalek, and things happen by chance, right? Amalek does not believe in the supernatural. So a lot of people today don't believe, even though the majority of the world probably believes in God at some level, right? Nonetheless, you hear these things like, all these things that happen in the world, it's all chance. They're all by chance. Quote unquote natural disasters, other things, they're all by chance. Nothing happens because God wills it. It's not about reward and punishment. You don't hear these things. They're obviously not going to say it, right? Nonetheless, it has an effect on a person. Because you say, well, so what if I hear it? Forget about the issue of Lashon Hara and accepting Lashon Hara and all that. That's a separate issue. That's a serious problem also. A very serious problem. But a person can say, I just want to hear what's going on. But you have to keep in mind, whatever you hear is going to be biased the way they're saying it. Right? History, which, studied for a number of years, history is his story, right? It's the way they portray it. Right? Two people can see the same thing, look at it totally different ways. Right? But again, they're portraying it a certain way. Well, here's what they say. Just, if you tell me, in general, they're presenting the facts. That's all they're doing. They're presenting the facts. Okay. So you got the facts. Very good. Right? But that's obviously not the case. They're giving their bias on what quote unquote the facts are. And you see this all the time. Especially about Israel. I don't think that any country whatsoever in the history of mankind has got as much bias against them as Israel. No matter what they do. Yeah? No matter what they do, it's always bad. Yeah. As humanitarian as they want to be, it doesn't matter. The whole world's against them. Right? It makes sense for a lot of different reasons. It's not, that's not really the point. Yeah. But even other things that they're portraying, right, other things that, they're giving over, if you tell me they're giving them over in an unbiased way, right? They're giving it away, they're giving it over in an unbiased way. If it's totally unbiased, okay, so good. Let them tell over the news. Let them say it over. Good. So let them say it over. But if that's not the case, right? Essentially, if that is not the case, and they're giving it over in a way where, they're giving their spin on it, and other people spin on it, and different things. Who cares, right? But that is planting ideas into a person's head that's making them biased. That 100% is making them biased, right? They're gonna, so as I said before, the person's gonna be very careful what they listen to. Very careful what they see. It has an effect, and certainly can have a negative effect. Okay, so let me take some questions here. Off-topic question. Some believe they have a family disease passed down. Something you'll tell me is what they're going to call hereditary. Okay. No medical test is supporting it. Okay. But the family keeps getting it. What would I think? Well, first of all, medicine, as we always say, is not the end to end all. Just because medicine has improved it doesn't mean it's not true. Right? So I would say, not knowing anything, I would say that if that is the case, if people are getting something and other family members have gotten it, you can't say it's a coincidence. Very hard, if say one person got it, out of 50 people, good. Right? That's probably, the way it is, and someone else gets it, okay, whatever. Right? But if you tell me a number of people get it, even though medically it hasn't been proven, right? That doesn't mean medically it's true. It could be hereditary. And it's because medicine doesn't say so. Right? If a person, let's say, for example, if a person knows a bunch of people in their family have had diabetes. Yeah. So what do? They take blood tests, they check. They check sugar issues. Why? The people in the family have had it. Good. Now, what if a number of people got it? What if a number of people had diabetes in the family? Yeah. But medically, they got it from, I don't know, different things. Let's say they got it much later in life, or, whatever the case is. Now, medically, they'll say, well, it's not hereditary. Well, in this case, it is, right? Because there are things that are hereditary, right? That a person can get under, certain circumstances. Good. But I would say, again, not knowing anything, I would say, my guess would be that if a bunch of people got it, even though medically, it doesn't say it's hereditary, who says it isn't? Maybe it is. Right? Maybe it is. So I would say other people in the family have to be careful. Even if medically, let's say it doesn't show anything. If medically it doesn't show anything, yeah, and you have a number of people that got the same thing. Maybe some got it stronger, some got it weaker, it doesn't matter. Right? That would tell me that other people in the family should be worried about this. Even if they take tests, let's say they take all the medical tests, and all the medical tests say they don't have it. Yeah, let's say they don't have it, or whatever. Now, does that mean they're going to get it? Again, I would be cautious for it. Definitely be cautious for it. If these tests are really highly accurate, and they say it's not hereditary, then you're going to have to explain medically, which they may not have an explanation for. Then you're going to have to explain medically why a number of people in the same family got it. Now, if they got it in totally unrelated circumstances, then it's hard to say it's hereditary. Yeah, then it's hard to say it's hereditary. But, if they got, let's say for argument's sake, they got it, they each got it similar ages. give or take. Give or take a few years here and there. Would you say that's more common now? Probably. In other words, there are probably things more in common than not. But again, I would say, if a bunch of people got it, but it doesn't show up in any, medical thing, again, if I were a family member, I'd be cautious for it. Yeah. You know, medicine's not all what it's cooked up to be. Again, let's say a person's worried about it. They're worried they themselves may get it. Okay. So they take a whole battery of tests, and everything looks good. Okay. So does that mean they're not going to get it? Just because it looks good doesn't, I would say it's something they should be careful of. Yeah, but a whole battery of tests doesn't necessarily prove anything either, right? I know of a story of somebody that I think if they were in their 60s, they had normal checkup, so had all these battery of tests, very good, everything came out fine. Everything came out fine. A few months later, they either had a massive stroke or massive heart attack. Yeah, that they never recovered from. Now, if you were to tell me, that family has a history of heart issues, so then that person probably should have been more careful, right? Well, let's say they don't. Let's say they had a family member died of a heart attack. Maybe they had someone else, but they were never diagnosed. And this person also never diagnosed. Again, could something happen where you're not diagnosed? Sure. Could. Is it probable? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. I didn't play one on TV. But again, I would say, even if the medical field, doesn't adhere to it, but a lot of people are getting it, I would say it's something to be concerned about. I would definitely say, they're getting it the same way. Maybe they're getting it at different ages. Okay. But if a number of people got the same thing and medicine doesn't prove it, I don't know, maybe it's a problem. Maybe it's a problem what they're trying to prove. But if they're getting the same thing, I don't see why you wouldn't be worried about it. Right? Because people say, well, medical profession hasn't proven it, but you got 4 or 5 people got the same thing. Within the same family. Or whatever, within different families. So, why? Yeah, you're gonna say that's a major coincidence? I don't know. Yeah. You can tell me, listen, one got it from blood transfusion, one got it from something else. They got it in different ways. That's different. That'd be a different issue. But if they all basically got it the same way, it's very hard to say. Very hard to say. It's not something in the genes, right? That's what I would say. Again, medicine. The medical establishment can say there's nothing proven it. Okay, but how do you explain? And they're probably not going to have an answer for this, right? Unless it's something obvious. So then you would have to ask them, which they're not going to want to answer, right? Because they probably won't have an answer. And that is how to explain, let's say you have a whole bunch of people got the same thing in the same family. How do you explain that? How do you explain it medically? You say, well, we don't have a medical explanation, but it's not hereditary. Okay, so let's say it's not hereditary, but why'd they get it? Now, are they exposed to the same thing? I mean, whatever. There are different factors involved there. Yeah, but again, just because it hasn't been proven, I wouldn't say, it's something that I would push off. I'd probably be careful for it. But again, if they got, let's say you had 5 people. Let's say you had 5 people, the same family, right? They're all related. They all got this thing in different ways. So that's hard to say it's hereditary. But if they got it in a similar way, some older, some younger, yeah, I would say it's something to worry about. That's what I would say on that. What's the guideline for how many hours per day is best to study Torah? Person has to have a fixed amount of Torah, right, to learn. Right, a woman also, right, doesn't have the same obligation to learn as a man, but it doesn't matter. A woman should also have fixed time to learn. How much time? How much time they can make. Some people will be 2 hours a day. Some people will be 1 hour a day. Right? Depends how much time they have. right? And all things being equal, with things they have to do, right? So, if they have errands to take care of this and that, okay, you got person got a fixed time. How much time? Depends on the person, right? Depends on the person. Person works all day, let's say, or they work a good chunk of the day. So obviously it's gonna be less time. If a person has more free time, the question is how much can they study? So it depends, right? It definitely depends. The more free time a person has, you can use it in different ways. You can for sure use it in different ways. A person has to have a fixed amount of time. How much time? Depends, right? Depends on it depends on the person. Shem runs the world. Does he not control who gets diseases? Obviously he does, right? So whoever's going to get the disease, right? God will give it to them. How do you separate hereditary disease from God's will? Even if it's hereditary, who says the person's going to get it? It's not a guarantee. It's definitely not a guarantee a person's going to get it. They may get it. They may get it. Right? They certainly may get it, but that doesn't change anything. Right? A person's going to have a hereditary disease and not get it. Yeah. Or God can decree that this person's going to get it like everybody else got it. But even if something, you got to keep in mind, even though God runs the world, which we believe, even if, God forbid, there's certain hereditary things the person could have. Now, it could be that person is more subjected to it than other people because, it is hereditary. Now, does that mean a person's going to get it? Now it depends, right? It depends. If, now they do genetic testing, before people get married, if, a person didn't get genetically tested, two Jews married, they're both carrying members of a certain disease. They have a bunch of kids and the kids die. Yeah. And the kids die, whatever it is. Now, if there was genetic testing, these people would never have kids, or they would have got married. Because they know bringing in a child, and both are carriers, let's say, if they're both carriers, then you say, well, a child can live as long as it's going to live and this and that. Yeah, but if right, if both are carriers, right, and that's what people do. They, before they even date, they do genetic testing for certain things. If, one is a carrier, one isn't, they'll let them go out. If both are carriers, they'll say no. They'll say no, because they know if both are carriers, chances exponentially go up, that they're going to have this type of child, the child's going to die. Yeah, so but God runs the world, he can change that, you're right. Right? 100% God can change and make sure it never happens. Yeah, the problem is you're putting yourself in a situation you can't rely on miracles. Forbidden to rely on miracles. If two people are carriers and you have a very, very strong possibility in a huge probability that if you have a child, that child's going to die. Genetically, this, right? Now, you could say, well, God runs the world. He can make them not genetically that way. You're right. You're right. The problem is that that you have a very, very high percentage that's going to happen. So if there's a high percentage, you can't rely on miracles. Right? And those two people should never have kids or never get married. Yeah, but if it's something hereditary, right? We'll just keep to this. If it's something hereditary, then it's God's will that either they will get it or they won't get it. Now let's say they get it. Let's say 100%, whatever disease is, they get it. Okay. And let's say it does kill them. All that means is that's how God took them. Yeah. God could have taken them any other way. Let's say, I'll give an example. Person has heart disease in their family. Yeah, so the likelihood of getting a heart attack at a relatively young age is probably very high. It's probably a very good chance at some point they'll have a heart attack. Not to kill them, but whatever. Now, does that mean they're gonna die from it? No. Maybe they get killed in a car accident. I don't know. Maybe they drown. Maybe I don't know, they die in other ways. Yeah, they got cancer. Yeah, cancer's not, heart disease, right? Heart disease is the number one killer, by the way, heart attacks, and not cancer. But in general, let's say a person has hereditary disease. That doesn't mean it's going to kill them. Yeah, even if they get it. Even if they get it. God can take a person any way he wants. So it doesn't so if it's God's will that they have that hereditary disease, they die from it, that's his will. Yeah. But it can also be his will, even though they have it, it's hereditary, it doesn't kill them. Right? It could be his will that they die from something else. Yeah, but even if that's the case, and they're more, I guess, biased towards it, that could happen. That doesn't mean that's not God's will, right? You say, but that could happen. That could happen anyway because that's the nature. But obviously, God knows the nature of man. So if God knows the nature of man, could He give it to them and kill them? Yes, 100%. Yeah, but let's say they die a different way, even if they are. So what? Right? That's also His will. It's His will is they die a different way. Okay. Yeah, but who says even if it's hereditary, they're going to die from it? Doesn't mean that. But if they do, that's His will. Right? That's the way He took that. Someone asks, is studying 3 hours a day good goal for studying Torah and prayer? For prayer itself, for a Jew, afternoon, let's say for a woman, you pray twice a day, right? In the morning, afternoon. Morning can take a little bit longer. 40 minutes, 45 minutes, could take an hour, whatever. Afternoon service could take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, let's say. So so that's in prayer. So how much time do you have to learn Torah? So let's say you have another hour and a half, 2 hours. That's good. It's definitely good. You have to make it realistic, and I think a person, if they're gonna have fixed times to learn, they should try and have the same fixed time every day. Right? They shouldn't change it. If they have to, they have to. But you want to be consistent. If it's haphazard and you're learning this time in the morning or this time at the night, and you change things around or whatever, it's not consistent. But you have to have a schedule. 100%. You have to have you should try and make a fixed schedule where it doesn't change. If possible. Now things can come up, you don't have a choice. Right? Things can offset that. Okay. But if you're not, if a person's doing things in a haphazard way, that's not good. Right? In other words, the times that they learn should be the same time every day, if possible. I mean, Shabbos probably and festivals will be a little bit different, right? In that sense. So I would say, I would say that however much time a person is going to learn, right, should be, sometimes you have more time to learn, right? So if you have more time to learn, good. But it should be consistent, right? That is the point. Should be consistent. Whatever it may be. Someone asks, does a woman study 3 hours? It's going to be hard if she has other obligations, right? I would say studying an hour is probably good if she could do that, right? Certainly if a woman has little kids or other obligations, yeah, it's going to be less than that. Definitely going to be less than that. Doesn't mean she shouldn't study at all, but if a woman has less obligation, yeah, why shouldn't she study more if she has less obligation? Yeah, no question. It depends on the situation. Somebody asks if someone was a crypto Jew. Yeah, meaning they were what they call B'nai Anusi, right? I don't know, they were keeping Torah mitzvahs, even though outwardly, maybe they were like Christians or whatever. Okay. If they were a crypto Jew, and then converted to Orthodox Judaism, they were the line of David. How are they going to be the line of David? Could a convert be from the line of David? Yeah, I think it's going to be kind of a problem. I don't think a convert is going to be the Messiah. No offense, any converts out there. Um, but um, um, in that case, right? In that case, you have to, um, through paternal descent, has to go to King David, right? So normally tribal status is going to be through the mother, right over here, or through conversion. But here is father to son, right? In other words, to be a be a to be to be a what do you call it? To be a descendant of King David, right? It's going to go through the mother. The mother isn't Jewish, and you have to convert, right? Then that's not or let's say better. It really has to be through the father, right? Essentially, it has to go through the paternal line to be from the tribe of um, King David. So therefore, someone who converts not going to come through that line. Impossibility, right? Because the convert is not going to come. It goes through the father. So the father's not Jewish, can't come from the line of David. So that won't happen. They won't be eligible. How does the Messiah get around the curse of Jacona? Why? Through an intermarried Jew. Well, who says he's going to come from an intermarried Jew? We don't know where the Messiah is going to come from. All we know is the Messiah has to be from the line of David. That's what we know. That's what we know. Now, could it be? Let's say, if the mother's Jewish, okay, let's say the person's Jewish, very good. The person's Jewish, let's say, but the father is a goy, right? The father's a non-Jew. Okay, so if the father's a non-Jew, he can't be from the tribe of David, right? He can't be from the tribe of David, right? If the mother, the mother wasn't Jewish, even if the father was, and he came from the line of David, very good, but his mother's not. His wife isn't Jewish, so his kid converts, right? It doesn't help, right? That won't help either way, right? That wouldn't help either way. Somebody asks, woman's going to rely on her husband to guide her. She has an obligation to him and the family, right? Right, or she has her own rabbi, whatever. But yeah, in other words, if if a woman has kids, obviously her obligation to learn is much less, but there are plenty of things she needs to know, right? How to run a kosher home, how to keep Shabbos, right? How to run how to work a blend or a what's it called a hot plate, on Shabbos. Her husband can guide her, that's for sure, but the things she has to know, as well. So, if possible, she doesn't have, even if she has other obligations, she'll try and learn a little bit on her own, but she'll have less obligation. She doesn't have kids around anymore, or she doesn't have those obligations. Different issue, right? That is a different, that's a different issue. Then, she could learn more, do volunteer work, do other things, but, she's definitely learn more. Interesting question. Does she have an obligation to learn more, or could she volunteer and do other things? Right? Again, she can have fixed time to learn, but it doesn't mean she has to learn all day. Right? She can do other things as well. Is there a schedule you can follow that's followed every week throughout the world, like Shabbos is done at sunset or whatever? Right? Or study guide we can also study. It's not something fixed. Everyone will study different things. I mean, listen, anyone in the process of conversion, there are plenty of things, plenty of things to learn outside of conversion, right? You say, yeah, I gotta learn blessings, kashrus, prayer, all those things. Yeah, you should also learn Chumash. Tanakh, you should learn about not speaking Lashon Hara. I mean, there are a lot of things, outside of conversion. So the only thing I can say is you got to make a schedule for yourself, and there's not a fixed schedule. People have different timelines, different things they do, right, during the day. Some people have more time, some people have less time. But whatever it is, a person should definitely make up, a schedule and keep to it. Like this time they're going to learn this, this time they're going to learn that, this time they're going to learn something else, and try and stick to it. Right? It can't be a fixed schedule for everybody because everyone's at different levels. Everyone's learning different things, and even for the sake of conversion, there are plenty other things to learn besides that, and people's schedules change. Also, so it can't be something, I wouldn't say something fixed, per se. It's personal, right? It is personal for each, it's going to be personal for each person, right? Whatever they're going to learn outside of, what they're doing for conversion depends on the person, right? But again, knowledge is power. So if a person learns other things as well, you only gain, right? You learn the Torah portion of the week, you learn Tanakh, you learn, what do you call it? You learn Musar, ethics. Person learns laws of Lashon Hara, right? You learn about that as well. I mean, plenty of things to learn, outside of quote unquote what you need to learn for conversion, right? The other things I would say are extra, but they're also important, right? Certainly not, learning how to not speak Lashon Hara is pretty important, right? Learning Musar, I think, is important. If certainly for a guy, woman doesn't necessarily have that obligation, but it's also good to learn, to learn these things. But yeah, you have to make time. It is going to be personal because people have, people have different obligations, different schedules, and all that. So, again, it'll be more what a person can do on their own, and each person's going to be different. Some may be more similar or less similar. It doesn't really matter. Point is that they're going to have less. Some people have more obligations, more things to do or less things to do, right? Now, why is that? Again, depends on their own situation. It'll depend on that. So it's not going to depend. It's not going to depend on something that's fixed, in stone per se. It depends on the person, right? Depends what their needs are. There are 1.5 million things to learn. I mean, it's not not a shortage of things. Again, some people will be more, let's say, into learning Jewish law. Some people, will be more into learning Chumash or Tanakh or philosophy or Musar. There's some basic things though outside the laws you need to know for prayer and kashrus and Shabbos. I mean, there are basic things I think a person should learn. Like a person should know the laws of Lashon Hara and should constantly review them. I think that's important. I think learning books of Jewish philosophy, let's say like duties of the heart. I think that's pretty crucial. And things like that. So again, it'll depend. It'll depend on the person, what their affinity is, what they enjoy more or whatever, and it'll depend on what their obligations are. I would say if they have less obligations, in general, again, certainly for a guy, he should be learning as much as possible. For a woman, it's different; doesn't have the obligation. But again, if a woman wants to, I mean, something, there's nothing stopping them. As long as they're learning things that pertain to what they need to learn, right, and not things that they're not supposed to learn. So that wouldn't be, that wouldn't be an issue. Someone asks, "What do you do when they're with a corrupt base and go somewhere else? Try and go somewhere else. Sometimes, sometimes even if that's the case, nothing to do. There's nothing to do, right? I know in certain places I would tell people just move, because you're not going to get anywhere. Yeah, so that's what you do. If you can't move, you try to go some other base, if possible. And what if you don't have a choice? Yeah. What if you don't have a choice and there's a corrupt basin? So you don't have a choice, right? I don't have an answer for that. Try and circumvent it if possible. Sometimes you can't, right? There's certain places, yeah, that there's corruption, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There is corruption, and there are bad rabbis out there doing things they shouldn't do. So what do? How do you fight against it? You can't. It's very hard to. It's very hard. Let this one person call with the shots, get it out for you. It's very hard. Yeah, very, very hard. Now, I would say though, if that was the case, and a person went somewhere else, and they explain their situation, they probably understand the situation. Yeah, they're probably aware of the situation. If not aware of the situation, you can tell them the situation. Yeah, you don't have a choice. I mean, some cases that's the only game in town, so you try and circumvent the problem. You try and go elsewhere. What if the community says this is the only place you can go, and it's their way of the highway? And I don't have an answer. Yeah, then you got to deal with them. If they're the only game in town, they're the only game in town. If there's no other way to get around it, you're stuck. That's that. That's my bad answer. I know in certain places that it's like that. It's like that, and what people have done is they've circumvented or they tried to circumvent it. Yeah, they tried to get around the problem. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Yeah, but I know some people that they said it's impossible to convert here. So I said, if you can go somewhere else, go somewhere else, if possible. And if you can't, the only game in town, they're making life impossible. I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer. Can't convert on your own. Can't convert on your own. You shouldn't take 3 kosher Jews and convert, right? Just because you want to circumvent the problem. No one's going to accept it, right? Very few people would accept it, right? So, and that's it. You're stuck. And that's my answer. Why does Hashem tolerate? Who says he tolerates it? It exists. It exists. Yeah, even if it does exist. So, you know, it could be, part of the goal is anyone in such a place to realize, nothing doing here. They got to get out of Dodge, and they get out of Dodge, and it moves them, gets them to move. For one possible reason. One possible reason. Yeah, it gives people free choice. Some places are better than others. I would agree. I would definitely agree. Some places are much worse. Yeah, but that's what it is. That's what it is in some places. Not all places are bad. Some are. Right? So I would tell people never to come to Israel, convert, it's worse. Yeah. A lot of corruption, different things. But the chief rabbin's the only game in town. If you want to live here, you have to go through them. So I have a way to sign to circumvent it, in a certain way. But you have to go through them anyway. Right? So you try and do both at the same time. I can send someone to another rabbinical court and the chief rabbin at the same time. So the other rabbinical court, very good. But that will be recognized according to the government. So, according to the Ministry of Interior. So at the same time, you have to go through the chief rabbin. It takes longer, this, that, so on. That's the only game in town, so what do you do? So I tell people, don't come here. This is the worst place to convert, one of the worst. Yeah, so that's it. That's what it is. Someone asks, as woman learn recipes, techniques, proper fabrics for her family, according to Welsh hara and history and how to speak Hebrew, Muslim, how to make blessings, holidays, prayers. Ooh. Yeah, that's really so much, right? That's a lot. 100%. 100%. That's, that's quite a bit. Someone asked, Chabad.org has daily study too. Yeah, it's also good. It's definitely also good. A lot of good things there. I would stay away from Kabbalistic things and Tanya and other things, but for the most part, daily things are good. Right? So, a person's doing a lot, that's good. You do what you can do. If you can do more, good. If you can't, you can't. Right? But you want to focus on things that, practically speaking, staying away from Lashon Hara, that's how much study every day. I just study every day. Jewish philosophy, I think it's very good. I think it's very good to go through. Chumash, if you can go through. Besides the other things, it's good. right? Learning about Jewish history is also good. I mean, again, it's not a shortage of things to learn, right? It's a question of time, right? It's definitely a question of time. Yeah. Any other questions? Someone asked about people finishing their conversion in 1 year in Israel. Yeah, but that's not the norm. That's not the norm. So, even if some people did it, okay, that's not the norm. That's not the norm. Usually it takes 2 years if you hear it. It could take even longer. It definitely take longer. But um, if some people did it in a year, good. So it took them a year. Yeah. First of all, I think it's going to take longer for most people. Yeah, and second of all, not every case is the same. So, like I said, I think this is the worst place to convert. In most ways. In most ways. But some people have an easier time. Great. You know, you got to tell me that's the majority of people. I can tell you plenty of stories not that way. Plenty of stories. Not that way. That took much longer, and other things that made them do, and whatever. So, like, okay, someone had an easy time. Good. Majority of people don't have an easy time. They don't have an easy time. Finish. Yeah, you want to tell me a few cases here and there? Okay. Yeah, but it's not the majority. What do we want to know what we're getting into instead of rushing for a conversion? It depends. It depends. Yeah, person has to know what they're in for. That's for sure. Yeah, but normally, when a person's in the process of converting, they just want to learn, right? 100% they want to learn. But yeah, they have to realize what's out there. Some places are better than others, right? To convert, that's true. You have some, rabbinical courts that are bad. Yeah. I would agree. Some communities I wouldn't send people to. Right. Okay. But, once the person understands what they're in for, so, it can be frustrating. Got a number of frustrating people and different things, and different things. But like, I'll say one thing. The only thing I'll say is, if a community has a certain standard and, across the board, they do it for everybody, no one can come and say it's not fair. You can say it's not fair, yeah, in what they do, but if they're consistent in what they do, then they're not discriminating against you. They're doing what they do. Yeah, that is a consistency. Fine. If they're making life difficult for one person and not for another, and they're going through the same thing and different things, okay. Right? That I would hear. But if they have a certain standard and that is their standard for better or for worse, that's it. That's their standard. I'm not saying you have to like it, but that's the standard. They're being consistent. They're not singling people out. Yeah, I told people this. They're like, that's discrimination and it's wrong and whatever. But that's what they hold. For example, you have a school that will not take kids before they're converted. Yeah, they will, but they're doing this. Some will, some won't. But if that's what they hold, that's what they hold. You can say it's not fair. You can jump up and down. You can scream. They've been doing this for 20 years, for 25 years. They don't take kids that are not Jewish, even if they're in the process of conversion. They don't take kids, period, if they're not Jewish. So what are you screaming about? That's what they hold. They're not playing games here. That's what they do. That's consistently what they do. You don't like it, okay? You don't have to like it, but that's what they do. They're not singling you out. They're singling out non-Jews in the process of conversion. That's what they're singling out. Everybody. Yeah, you can say you don't like it. Doesn't matter if you like it or not. That's not the point. The point is they're consistent. If they're playing games and they say some people yes, some people no, different issue. But if they're saying across the board that's what they hold, then that's what they hold. You can say it's not fair, it's not right, it doesn't matter. Let someone curse me out, curse rabbis out in certain community, and different things. And I'm right, but that's what they hold. You can't hold them against it. That is what they hold. Yeah, you don't have to like it. Okay. Make life uncomfortable for you. Okay. So what? That's what they hold. If they're inconsistent and they're discriminatory, fine. Different issue. Totally different issue. Totally different issue. Somebody asks, Community integration is a problem for extraordinary situations. That's a problem. Yeah, how do you pursue the rabbi think plan B in such cases? Well, try and circumvent it. You try and circumvent the problem. That's what you do. That it depends what the situation is. It depends what the situation is. Sometimes there's no easy solution, or there is no solution. Sometimes, right? Well, I'll give an example. If you live in South America, they don't do conversion in South America. Yeah, nobody does conversion in South America. So if you live in South America, you want to convert, what do? You gotta move. Either you gotta move somewhere else or go to a base that's going to accept you and then come back. It's going to cost a lot of money. Okay, even if it does, there's no other solution except to move. You say, I can't move. So that's the only other solution. You try and find a rabbinical court. It's not going to be so easy to find a rabbinical court willing to do it. Yeah. So what do you do in that situation? There's no plan B. There is no plan B. There's nothing to do. They don't do conversion the entire continent. The entire continent, for better or for worse, they don't do conversion. So what are you supposed to do? Not going to change the situation. That's the way it is. Now, if a person goes to a certain rabbinical court somewhere else and it gets accepted in their community, okay. Or they have to move. You have to say it's not fair. It's not a question of being fair. They don't do conversion in such a place. That's it. They don't do it. There's no plan B. There's no plan B, plan C, or plan F. That's it. They don't want converts. They don't want converts, period. So you got to move. That is what you have to do. Or find a rabbinical court willing to do it outside the country that they'll accept. That's the only thing you can do. Yeah. And they'll accept conversions from other rabbinical courts. They just won't do it in their own country. They're going to say that's ludicrous. You can say what you want. That's what they do. That is what they do. Yeah. And that situation is not going to change anytime soon. Never going to change. They can say if it's unfair. Okay. What are you going to do? You want to be Jewish, you live in a place that they don't do conversion. What are you going to do? You're going to go somewhere that does it, or where they accept it. That's the only thing you can do. That's plan B, C, D, E, and F. Yeah. Someone here says they do conversion exchange services for women. Yeah. When you get proof, tell me. When you get absolute proof, tell me. Yeah. And if you have absolute proof, yeah, they should be shut down. 100% they should be shut down. Or extortion for a high amount of money. It's also bad. Also bad. So that would be the case. I know someone told me to go to a certain rabbinical court. Somewhere going to cost them 10 grand. I said, 10 grand? I said, I'll do it for 3.5, 4. I said, 10 grand, who says it's going to be good anyway? Right? That's extortion. That's 100% wrong. Yeah, they should be called out for it. And if they're doing other things, sexual favors, yeah, for sure it's wrong. Yeah. You keep hearing things. Okay, get proof. Don't tell me it's hearsay because it doesn't mean anything. Right? Unless it's been proven. Yeah, if it's proven, good. Yeah, then that's a different issue. Right? Hearsay doesn't mean anything. Right? Somebody asks, should we expect to be tested by the community? Yeah. I don't think tested, the community wants to see you're the real deal. Yeah, and a person always probably going to have to prove themselves at some point because, converts can flake out also. So yeah, I mean, at some point you should be accepted, right? At some point, but they're going to be skeptical, and they should be, right? Because less than 20% actually finish the process anyway. Yeah, even if they move to a Jewish community. But even if someone says, I'm going to be the real deal, whatever, they don't have to worry. Okay, but they're still going to be skeptical. Still going to be skeptical, right? These women, they turn Christian. Okay, yeah. So it's the Beis Din's fault if they do it. It is the Beis Din's fault if they do it. I agree, and they're gonna be responsible, 100%. They're gonna be responsible for if these people could have converted, they went off and they did other things. If they are responsible, if that is true, if it is true, right? Who decided no convert the entire continent? They don't do it. Mexico, other places, they don't do it. Right? Who decided? They don't want converts. Like, what do you think? Why do you think they don't want converts? Why do you think they don't want converts? It's converts giving Jewish people a name. There's a lot of people that are false converts and made problems. So there are places that won't want to do it. I don't think it's so hard to understand. They don't want no Jews infiltrating, and doing other things that aren't on the up and up. That's why. I don't want them. Makes sense. You have to say, what about the few people that are real? Okay. Yeah. So it's a problem. I'm not saying nothing, but there's a bigger problem. There's a much bigger problem, which no one wants to admit over here. It's a much bigger problem. A lot of problems is you got a lot of these fake people coming in and mooching off of us. That's the problem. And they don't stick. That's a problem. Yeah. So a base din that converts them and they don't stick, who gets all the favorites? Who gets all the transgressions? The base din does. But don't you think they're going to take their sweet little time? I'm not talking about being corrupt. Don't you think they're going to take their sweet little time and make sure the person's on the up and up rather than get screwed over? Makes sense. It's happened. For sure, it's happened. So since it's happened, how can someone say, I can't believe they would do that? Why not? The community gets messed over. And they get all the transgressions. Why should they convert people? Yeah? Takes a big responsibility. I'm not saying they should just say, no, don't do it. Right? But they're taking huge responsibility. Yeah, so they're going to be extra cautious. I'm not talking about corruption. They should be extra cautious. They get all the transgressions. So someone asked me what the percentage is. I've gotten this question before. I don't have an answer. What's the percentage of people that convert and go off? I don't know. I don't know what the percentage is, but rabbinical court has huge responsibility. Huge responsibility. So if they take more time or whatever, just to make sure they think this person's not going to flake out, yeah, and they're going to get all the transgressions, they have a right. They absolutely have a right. I don't think there's a question. I don't think there's a question. Yeah. It's a huge responsibility, right? It's a huge responsibility. What if someone has a Jewish soul there? Even if they do. So if they're supposed to convert to get to the right place, they'll convert. If not, not. It's a test. It's a big test. Right? No question. But a rabbinical court will pay the price if they mess people over. They will pay the price. Whether you think it's fair or not fair, they will pay the price. And if a person goes off and they could have converted, they didn't, or they caused other problems, they'll pay the price. I know of a certain, rabbinical court based in that, pushed away people they shouldn't have pushed away, and they converted people they shouldn't have. Yeah. So what's their status? I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. Yeah. Totally wouldn't trust them. They make mistakes? Yes. Serious mistakes? Yes. Right? So I had somebody in such a place, I had them convert somewhere else. Exactly for that reason. Exactly for that reason. Yeah, but they're taking huge responsibility. Just understand that. It's not just like someone comes in, okay, I want to convert, blah, 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 I'm the real deal. And they show the real deal. Beautiful. What about the 20, 30, 50, 100 people that aren't? They have huge responsibility. So they're going to call it the way they see it. They'll take as long as they think it should take until they're convinced that the person's the real deal. I'm not saying that's to take forever, but they have huge responsibility. I don't think you're taking that into account. The corrupted it should not be allowed to be rabbis. Okay. There are corrupt people out there, yeah. People I wouldn't even call rabbis, by the way. Wouldn't even give them the dignity of calling them rabbis. Yeah, they cause more problems than they should. I know plenty. Unfortunately. So yeah, they should totally be disbarred if they could be. The problem. Some people happen. Some people, yeah, took away their rabbinic ordination because things they did. 100%. 100%. Right? But again, just, the rabbinical courts that are doing a good job out there, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing, but they have huge responsibility. Got to take that into account. And they probably also been messed over. Yeah, but they're still willing to go forward. Other people won't do it because they got messed up. Yeah, that's a serious thing. It's not a small thing. It's not small. And they say, fool me once, whatever the statement is, fool me twice. Like, you're stupid. Yeah. That's why some places won't do it. They got messed over. They won't do it. They just won't do it for better, for better or for worse. Right. It's also a fake converts. Thank you very much. Yeah, there have been problems. There have been problems. People that converted that never should have converted. Yeah, either rabbinical court has converted them because they're doing things they shouldn't be doing, right? Or they got fooled. It's not. It's a problem, right? It's definitely a problem. Well, I'm not going to say not. But rabbinical courts have a right to make their decisions as long as they're doing what they need to do and they're not corrupt. Because you're humans at the stick, does a human being used as a stick also pay a price? Of course they do. They're guilty. God used them. God used them, but they have free choice. They made a choice. They made a choice to mess someone up, to steal from them, to do whatever. Are they guilty? Sure. Right? Should the person get mad at them or realize God sent them for you? You should realize God sent them for you. Okay. Yeah, but the person's guilty, nothing to talk about. Person stole, did other things, they're 100% guilty, even if God used them as a stick. Totally guilty. Other people sort of use as sticks to protect synagogue, or are they the outskirts of synagogue or Chabad? No, you have people, that are out there doing good things and helping. I'm just saying, you have other, you have both sides of the coin. You have people that are doing the wrong thing, right? And God's using them as a stick to get to you, and other people that are helping. I mean, I'm not going to say they totally offset, but I would say in general that if someone wants to go in the right direction, God's going to put you in contact with someone who's going to help you. Right? If you don't want to go in the right direction, okay. But even that being said, doesn't mean everything goes smooth. Some people have smoother experiences, some people have harder experiences. Anywhere in between. Anywhere in between. Sometimes it's not pretty. Like I'm not here to justify it. Right? Sometimes it can be very not pretty. Yeah. Okay, but at the end of the day, people are human. They make mistakes. They can't make mistakes. Some people can be corrupt. That is true. And sometimes, it has nothing to do with them. It's the situation itself. And sometimes in certain situations, you know what? You can't fix it. There are certain situations, unfortunately, you can't fix. So what do you do? What do you do? Someone's divorced. They have a child. Yeah. Equal, joint custody. Yeah, meaning they go to the father, so often, even if they live with the mother, whatever. Yeah. They're not going to convert them. Not going to convert the child in such a case until the child's old enough. It's fair. It's not fair. It's across the board. It's across the board. They won't do it because the other spouse is problematic, let's say. It's not discrimination. That's the way it is. But I want my kid to convert. Okay. I'm not denying the person should convert. Yeah. I say the person should convert. Beautiful. But they're not in the situation to convert right now. So they have to wait. They have to wait. It's bar mitzvah. They want them to bar mitzvah the right time. It's not going to happen. Isn't that tragic? It's tragic. It's tragic. That's not discrimination. That's what they hold. It's what they hold across the board. That doesn't change. It doesn't change. It doesn't matter what secular Jews do. It doesn't matter about anything. That's the case. You have joint custody. One person not going in the right direction, right? The other person trying to go in the right direction. You get mixed messages. You can't convert a kid like that. You just can't. What are you supposed to do? It's tragic. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying the person shouldn't convert. Yeah, but under the circumstances, it's very hard. So how can you expect it? I understand it's painful. I get it, 100%. It's painful. And, no parent should have to go through such a thing. Yeah, but that doesn't change the reality. The reality is what it is. And you can't change it until, this kid becomes of age, they're on their own, then they can convert. Very good. Except but the kid didn't do anything wrong. I didn't say they did. But there's a reality. There's a reality. What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? It's a reality. Right? Some things in reality can't change. Right? You can't change. That's it. Here's an opportunity to let someone who might be corrupt to teach them to be not to be corrupt. If someone's corrupt, unless they're like seriously looking into things and they want to change, that's one thing. Usually that's not the case. And usually they'll have worse influence. So, better stay away from such a person, try and convince them. They're not gonna be interested in being convinced unless they want to be. A person can try, but it's probably a waste of time. It's probably a total waste of time. What's the best thing to do if you can't imagine any other way of life? And you have to move. You have to try and move. It's the only thing you can do. That's the only thing you can do. Even, I'm not, you don't want to stay in no hide, okay? So at some point you got to try and get out of Dodge. If you're stuck, if a person's stuck in a situation, let's say they're stuck in a situation. Let's say the place where they live totally corrupt. They can't convert there, make it life miserable. So you gotta convert somewhere else or move somewhere else. What if you can't? So you can't. So then you have to wait till you can. Then you're in flux. Then you're stuck. I wish I had a better solution. There's no better solution, right? The only solution is you got to move. That's the only solution. There's nothing else to do. And you can say I'm getting older. This okay, I get it. But again, what would you like to do? That's the only system in town. If you can circumvent the problem, good. If you can't circumvent the problem, what do? You move. You have to move at some point. Financially you can. Okay, so then you have to wait. Then you have to wait. Yeah, let me see other questions. I wish it was so easy. I wish it would be so easy that everyone in the same similar situation. All things being equal, they got a place to convert. Community's nice. Kumbaya, we're all playing the same. Playing the same guitar. Everything's beautiful, but it doesn't always work out that way. And sometimes it can be, extremely frustrating. But that's part of the challenge. So so a person could say, well, I had the opportunity to convert, or I should have converted years ago, but so much corruption I couldn't convert. It's going to be held against me. No, it's not going to be held against you. If you couldn't do it, you couldn't do it. God's not going to hold it against you. If you could have got out, you could have moved, you could have done something, and you didn't, that's a different issue. But let's say you couldn't. Onus. Onus will be a debo, right? You're stuck. There's no other way. There's nothing else to do. What do you do? So you're stuck. So a person's stuck. God's help everybody in their own situation. 100%. God should make it easy for everybody. As long as they're doing what they need to do. But doesn't always go that way. It doesn't always go that way. And sometimes, people are in bad situations. And unfortunately, I know a number of people in just very bad situations. And, all I can do is pray for them and throw up my hands. Nothing's going to change it on the ground, at least at the moment. Yeah, any other, I wish I had better news. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to stop here. I do this every Saturday, 2 o'clock Eastern Time, 9 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Chaim Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos of Q&As, ethics for fathers, book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN@gmail.com, whichever goods.